Could you guys tell I didn't comb my hair? Oh my god. I mean, it looks nice for not being combed, but at the same time, I should comb my hair. Hi guys, it's me, Moo. Guess what? I finally finished the final book, Midnight Predator, and I kind of remember why Baby Moo liked it. Yeah. She liked it because of a character named Jaguar. Okay, so I'm going to read you the synopsis from the back and then give an explanation on why I'm reading it to you. Midnight Predator. Once a happy teenager, Turquoise Draka is now a vampire hunter. Her current assignment is to assassinate Jessica, one of the most cruelest vampires in history, and to do that, she'll have to enter Midnight, a fabled vampire realm, as a human slave. The reason why I have a problem with this synopsis is because even though Jessica is in the book and is very cruel, she actually disappears a quarter from the end of the book. And then the new villain is actually a vampire named Daryl, who used to own Turquoise when she was a human named Catherine. In the first chapter, we're actually introduced to Turquoise and Raven, two very powerful vampire hunters that were once humans, just regular living humans. But I guess after you become a vampire hunter, you're no longer human. I don't know how that works. We see that they have been fighting for hours to be the leader of a certain group called Crimson. And then we know that they're part of a guild, and the guild is called Bruja. Translation, someone that deals with magic. There's different definitions of Bruja within different Latin and Hispanic communities, so I'm not going to get really into it, but we're never told why it's called Bruja. And we're never told exactly what they do, or exactly how they work, or who their leader is. We're just told that there's a guild named Bruja, and Turquoise and Raven are a part of it. So anyways, because they have been fighting for hours, it ends in a draw. It's draw. We're gonna have you guys fight in a few months or a few weeks with different weapons of our choice, and that's the whips. And then Turquoise has kind of a flashback because of whips, and then after 15 minutes, they leave. And then they're stopped by a vampire named Jillian Red. Now, Jillian Red was hired to find these two vampire hunters because when people hear their names, they know how powerful vampire hunters they are. And then she's like, I have a mission for you. You're going to go and kill the leader of Midnight and this and this and this. And then they're like, okay, cool. So then they end up catching up with another vampire named Nathaniel, who actually helped Turquoise escape her past. And we get a quick glimpse of Catherine's past, and we find out that she was actually a slave to a vampire named Daryl, or Lord Daryl, and that's it. And then we get to Midnight, which is actually a mansion and a town behind the mansion that is owned by a vampire named Jaguar. And Jaguar is described very handsome, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I could see why Baby Moo liked him so much. So then we're introduced to a character named Eric, and he's about 14 years old, and he is one of the slaves to Jaguar. Now, Jaguar is the new leader of Midnight, and this is where Jessica comes in, because she used to be the old leader of Midnight until that Midnight was like burned down, and all the slaves and everybody were like scattered across the world, and she's upset that Jaguar is the leader and she wants to teach him how to be a leader, but he fights her. And then Lord Daryl lives in the mansion because apparently vampires come and go, and Jaguar is not like a regular vampire. He actually treats his servants, he calls them servants, not slaves, better than most vampires. And he was quick, really quick, to be drawn to Turquoise. And it's kind of insinuated that they actually are attracted to each other. And, Raven and Turquoise actually has free reign within the house as long as they follow the rules. And then we find out that Jessica and a vampire named Gabriel are trying to kill Jaguar, or have him give up his position as the leader in Midnight. And then we also find out that Raven and Gabriel have something in common, and that Jessica is just like this total bitch. And then we also find out that Daryl lives there, and then in the courtyard it was locked, and Turquoise managed to pick the lock and go inside and sees this beautiful Jaguar that's missing an eye, and there's another Jaguar there. And then she tries to leave, but they're like covering the doors and she can't leave. And then we find out that Jaguar is the other Jaguar and that he actually raised the female jaguar that's within the courtyard, and he knew her mother. Like, that cat has been in generations since he's been alive. And then there's like this really intimate scene between Jaguar and Turquoise, and then we find out that Daryl wants Turquoise back, and she's like, no. So something happens, and Jessica's no longer the villain that we focus on. Daryl is, and we find out that when Catherine's about 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, Daryl killed her entire family, her mother, her father, and her little brother. We really don't get any information on the mother, but we get a lot of flashbacks of her father telling her that she's strong and powerful. We get a lot of flashbacks of Tommy, her younger brother, and that's it. Like, her mother wasn't really in the picture, which is really sad because the mother was murdered by Daryl. And then we find out Daryl wants her back because he had lost track of her and she was one of his favorite slaves. And then at this point in the story, it's like Jessica no longer exists and Daryl's the main villain. So I was like, what? Then Raven and Turquoise are exposed as vampire hunters, and then Jaguar ends up saving her. And Jaguar is really fond of Eric, and he's like, go take Eric, take him away from here. I'll give you a week. I forgot why it was a week or a month. So Eric and Turquoise ends up going into hiding. Raven ends up leaving with Gabriel to try to take down Jessica or plan something. And at this point, this is the last time we actually see Jessica. So when Turquoise and Eric leave, they stay at Nathaniel's house that he has within a city, get like new names, new papers, their brother and sister, and she ends up meeting a guy from her past named Greg. And at this point in the story, we are seeing how Turquoise is torn between being Catherine, her past, and Turquoise, her future. And Eric is like really super wise for being 14, and he's like, well, maybe Catherine's not dead. Maybe you have to accept that she was once a weak child that became into Turquoise, or something like that. It was actually really like, whoa, he's really wise. Turquoise ends up meeting with Jaguar at a cafe, and they talk about like midnight and stuff, and then for some reason the conversation moves to her challenge with Raven and their fight. And he's like, oh, well, I'm really good with the whip, let me show you. And she's like, okay. So they spent the whole month together, Jaguar teaching her how to use the whip, her and Eric being really domestic, like siblings, her realizing that she was missing out on a human life by being a vampire hunter. So then the day comes, and her and Raven are fighting at the Bruja Guild headquarters. And then Turquoise actually ends up winning, but then she realizes that she doesn't want to do this anymore, and she gives the title to Raven, who's really upset for some reason, and Gabriel's there. And they don't even talk about Jessica or like killing Jessica, and I was like, okay, why was Jessica mentioned? If she's the most cruelest vampire, why are they not fighting her, you know? So she ends up going back to her house, and it turns out that it's been burned down by Daryl. And luckily, though, Eric survived. So she ends up going back to the Midnight Mansion to fight Daryl, and she ends up killing him. And Jaguar's like, well, now you're free. You're free. You're free blood. You could do whatever you want. You're no longer a slave. And she's like, yeah, you know what? I could do whatever I want. And then it just ends there. We never ever see what happens next. We have no idea what happens with Jessica. We have no idea if she ends up with Jaguar. We have no idea if she ever did go into her domestic life or get a new house, or how Eric's doing in the world. It was just so abrupt. And that is one of Amelia's writing traits, is abrupt endings. And it doesn't feel satisfying at all, because you're left with these questions and these plot holes. What happened to Jessica? Weren't you guys supposed to kill her? Weren't you hired by Jaguar to kill her? But that never ever comes up. And I was like, it had such a good beginning, because you had this solid idea of what the climax would be. The two vampire hunters that are rivals are hired to kill a very cruel vampire. And that never fucking happens, because they were derailed to a different plot. It's like the plot line was lost. And I was like, what the heck? What is going on? Now, the book had a very good beginning, but I did not like that we were actually info dumped a lot with Raven. We didn't really get to see how she is. Like, there's talk of them being rivals, and when they get to the Midnight Mansion, Raven's not really there anymore. She's doing her own thing, and we just see snippets of them talking, and I was like, okay. And then it was really quick because they had just met Jaguar probably a few hours later, and then all of a sudden they had feelings for each other, and I was like, this is really quick. Like, where's the friendship? Where's the build of that, you know? And then there was like Amelia Atwater's other writing trait is, of course, dumping a lot of info and not really showing people exactly. And then they talk about shapeshifters, which is really cool. And then we find out that shapeshifters are actually their own species, but if they're transformed into vampires, they keep that trait. They could shapeshift into any animal. In the second book, we were told about werewolves, and yet we never see a werewolf. And then in the third book, werewolves no longer exist, but shapeshifters do. And I was like, okay. And in the third book, they talk about Single Earth Hospital and how it's a big thing and so many were popping up everywhere, but we are never shown that in this book. And then the Trieste witches, there's only one mention, but there's no mention of the witch line anymore. And it was reading all 4 of these books kind of felt like they all, like the first 3 were in the same universe, except there was so many continuity errors. Like she'll mention one thing, and then the second book she'll mention another thing and not elaborate on it, and the third book she'll mention so many other things and not elaborate on it. And then on the fourth book it was like a completely different book, honestly, because there were no mentions of the characters from the last book. There is a new paranormal society called the Bruja Guild that came out of nowhere. There is no explanation exactly on what it is. We have no time jumps. We have no hints of the previous books. Honestly, this book should have not been a part of the Den of Shadow Quartet because of how different it was. And I felt like if this book was actually part of a different series, it would have worked really well. But because it's part of a certain series, it just kind of felt completely different. Now let's get into the plot line. Like I said, the beginning of the book was actually really interesting. I really did want to learn more about the Bruja Guild. I wanted to learn more about Raven and Turquoise. We do get Turquoise's background, but we rarely get Raven's background, and she was like really mysterious, and she was born with like red hair and red eyes, and we get no explanation on why. We have no explanation on how she exactly knows Gabriel, because he is one of Jessica's like loyal vampires supposedly, but then the twist is he actually wants her dead too. And then when we're first introduced to Gabriel, he was really cruel and mean, like he beat the crap out of Turquoise. And then we see him again and he's all lovey-dovey and really like intimate with Raven, and it's like, okay, what happened? How do they know each other? We get no information on that. And then with Jaguar, we get his entire backstory in a dialogue, which is fine because it is moving the story ahead, but it's not like scattered through the book where when they are getting to know each other, you know, he says this stuff. It's literally them just sitting there and complete info dump on his past and her past while they're talking in one setting. And then, like I said, we go from a very interesting plot line of wanting to kill Jessica, and then after they're found out to be vampire hunters, nothing happens with Jessica. She is just pushed aside, and then Turquoise is living her life as a human, as a disguised human in a small city and getting ready to do her challenge. But it's like, what happened to Jessica? What happened to that plotline? Why did the plotline change from Jessica being the main baddie and trying to take down Midnight to Turquoise confronting her past and killing her past master? Like, how did the plotline just go off the rails? And what's like really irritating about this is that it's that Jaguar insinuates that Jessica's going to be killed off screen, and it's like, but the plotline says that they're supposed to kill her in the book on screen. Like, what kind of book is this? It feels to me like halfway through writing this book, Amelia got an idea and wanted a different book with Jessica and probably Raven, and to kill her in that book because Raven was like really set on killing her, and we never really get a satisfied ending. We only get an ending where, yeah, sure, Turquoise is free. She could be who she wants to be and live her life how she wants to live. That's a really good ending, but we don't see the follow-up. We're just cut off there. We don't see if she does go on and do that. We don't see what happens with her relationship with Jaguar or Eric or Nathaniel. We don't see if that she actually does live her life as a normal human. We don't see any of that building to that life. And the ending was kind of unsatisfying, honestly. A few words describing Jaguar's skin tone, and the caramel was used a lot, and I didn't like that because I was like, in my mind, I didn't think of the color caramel. I thought of the candy caramel, and I was like, ew, you're describing his skin tone as food. That's nasty. Now, finishing up this complete series has given me a look into my past and how much I have changed. And I'm not gonna lie, the only character that I actually really liked was Jaguar because he was kind of different from the vampires that we were introduced to throughout the entirety of the series, because he was very human-like. He was very caring to humans or his slaves, let's say servants. He didn't really beat them or submit them, make them submit to him. He talked to them and treat them with kindness. And I thought, okay, that's a good character there. And then, of course, Baby Moo loved Jaguar because reading his description, he is actually the blueprint of many of her characters that she had written when she was younger. But I could see that he is the blueprint of all of my original characters. Will I read these books again? No. Like, the funny thing is that these books actually help me be the writer I am, and have a certain mindset. And that mindset is write whatever the hell you want. Write about vampires, werewolves, and Amelia wrote whatever she wanted. And I grew up writing whatever the hell I wanted, not caring if people were gonna like it or not. And that is a good memory, and that was a good lesson these books taught me. And it also reminded me of a time where Baby Moo was so desperate to escape from her reality that she threw herself in these books. And reading these books just opened up my mind and reminded me where I was back then and where I am now, and reminded me what I want to do with my writing. And Amelia is older now, and she's written so many more books, and I want to read what she has written in the last few years because I want to see how she improved as a writer. I want to see where she's at now because I've read where she came from. These books, they were dear to my heart, but no longer. I'm finally finished with the Den of Shadows quartet. I guess this is my review of that. I'm going to move on to a different book when Baby Moo loved, and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to see where the book was at that time of her life and how Adult Moo feels about it now. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. I'll see you guys later. Bye.